in today's State of the Game, the devs revealed so much information about the endgame for the Division 2, and as hard as this might be to believe, there's actually a lot more here than what we already know. Instead of uploading the whole thing, I will break everything down into this digestible video. We learned a lot more about the world tiers, strongholds, the dynamic world, Black Tusk, and a lot more really. It's worth noting, there are no story spoilers here I'd say, but just like my last video, if you want to go in blind then please hit the thumbs up and go about your day. If you enjoyed this video though, please hit the like button below and subscribe for dedicated Division content, and with that said, let's get to it. Okay, so I'm going to go through this in the order the devs pretty much presented this information, and that way it should all kind of fuse together properly, because I wrote a whole lot of notes for this because there was a whole lot of stuff, so hopefully this is quite linear and you get everything. As expected, you play through the campaign, which includes taking down faction strongholds, and once you hit level 30, the final stronghold is unlocked. This is not new, we already knew this. Now it's important to note there are some significant differences between missions and strongholds. Strongholds are much harder and require certain things in order to play them, and we will touch on the specifics shortly. So you reach level 30 and you've defeated the 3 strongholds. What happens next? So there are some celebrations, but they are kind of cut short or short-lived. The streets of Washington D.C. run with blood, and the world is invaded by the Black Tusk, the sort of elite NPC faction within the game, basically. A 4th stronghold appears and essentially takes over the other 3 strongholds, forcing all of the other NPCs to take to the streets. The 4th stronghold is the final stronghold, and this unlocks at World Tier 4. At this point, you will be at World Tier 1, and your goal is to get to the final stronghold in Tidal Basin and take it down. So what are the requirements for these strongholds at this point? So the devs confirm that all of the strongholds require at least 2 specific missions per stronghold to complete. You will also need to hit a certain gear score to complete these as well, with the World Tier 1 stronghold requiring a gear score of 275. The devs didn't actually confirm the gear score required for the other 2. Now once you defeat any of the 3 on the map, you will move up a world tier, and the gear score will increase for the remaining 2, and the process repeats itself. Strongholds are very important in the story, and they are focal points in the game. As you imagine, every stronghold is a faction stronghold. You know, you've got your True Sons, you've got your Hyenas, and then obviously the final one being the Black Tusk sort of base of operations, as you were. Your goal will be to defeat these invaded strongholds, these strongholds that have been taken over by the Black Tusk, progress through the world tiers, and defeat the Tidal Basin stronghold, which, as I said, is the sort of Black Tusk base of operations. It's not invaded as such because it's kind of their home, but it is the 4th one, the main one. Once you defeat that, you will go to World Tier 5. The devs did say they bring some pretty bad stuff with them, and they almost said what that stuff was. They kind of had to be careful a little bit, obviously for story spoilers, but they did say they bring some pretty bad stuff with them, and they didn't really go into specifics, but I'm going to assume it's going to be pretty difficult. So obviously once you hit World Tier 1, which is when you hit level 30, the map will change, just as it did in the Division 1. Now on screen you will see the difference in the map between a level 15 player and a level 30 World Tier 1 player, and as you can see, it is significant. It gets significantly more red and more active as the entire map is consumed by the Black Tusk. Now, I do got to note, this isn't just you being level 30, this is when you're level 30 World Tier 1, so you obviously have to complete the campaign, the Black Tusks invade, and this is what the world will look like. The entire map is more active, and it's completely consumed by the invasion of the Black Tusk. Now, once this happens, the Black Tusk will bring their own sort of unique living world activities, and because of all the factions being forced from control points and all these other places to the streets, the other control points that you previously took over will be consumed by these factions, making them much more difficult to take back, and they are directly impacted on what you do in the world. Control points can be reinforced at World Tier 4. On the map, you might see a control point, and this is for World Tier 4, by the way, not from World Tier 1 to World Tier 3. You will see a control point surrounded by, say, activities, which each have a plus symbol next to them. If you complete these activities, it essentially sends an alert to the control point that it's obviously related to, and it ups the alert level or the difficulty level. Now, these particular activities, I believe, can go up to 2 pluses, meaning you could add 2 levels effectively to that control point. Now, this goes all the way up to level 4, which could be, or will be, heroic difficulty. And do you remember the giant orange loot crate in the supply rooms of these control points? Well, the higher the difficulty, the more loot and better quality loot you get. And that's important because what we don't want is obviously just loads of loot. We want better quality stuff. And they have specifically said, not only will you get more loot for doing this, obviously with the harder the stuff is, you are going to be rewarded with better quality loot, or certainly a better chance of getting better quality loot. Control points will not be this mundane activity you do once in a while. They will instead kind of be transformed into an endgame activity. And it's very clear here that everything in the game has endgame in mind, as you'll see. So still on World Tier 1, or going back to World Tier 1, once you hit level 30, one settlement will be blockaded, meaning you cannot fast travel there. And you have to take down the blockade by completing an event. They didn't say what this event was, so don't really know at this point. The whole world will become dynamic at this point as well. I mean, it's already dynamic anyway, but it will become even more dynamic as NPCs sort of interact with each other and the world responds to the way that you play. You meet a character who basically says you need a bigger gun, and that's when you are given your specialization, or the choice of specialization that you want. At this point, gear score becomes important. Up until now, you could easily sort of out-level the NPCs and have that power advantage, but not now. Now you'll be functionally lower than NPCs as the power fantasy flips and the world becomes immersed even more. A lot of other stuff happens at World Tier 1, like daily and weekly projects, and they're actually really, really cool as well. The way I understood it is that there will be a whole load of them. You don't have to, you don't, say for example, you've got this to do on this date for this day, but you don't want to do that, you want to do that tomorrow. You can skip that and do it tomorrow. If there's one that you've almost completed and you want to do it today, then you can choose that one, do it today. So instead of just having ones and you look at it and go, oh, I don't want to do that one today, and there's nothing else, you will be able to sort of swap and change and do what you want effectively. Other stuff happens as well, like you get introduced to the gun runner, and this is pretty cool, and it may actually be you may have actually seen this in other games in many ways. So during the campaign you meet someone called the Snitch, who gives you bounties which you can complete. At World Tier 1 you get introduced to their best friend, Casey Mendoza, otherwise known as the Gun Runner. Now the Gun Runner is a new vendor available at certain times in certain places. It's a roaming vendor and brings with them sort of one guaranteed name weapon and other really, really good loot. The inventory will stay for a week, but they can appear every sort of day and a half or so, or I believe the dev said maybe even sort of every 12 hours. The vendor is not in everyone's world. What I mean by that, you can only find the location of the Gun Runner by locating the Snitch. So if if your mate hasn't located the Snitch, they won't be able to find the Gun Runner, regardless of whether, it's been posted on the internet, whatever. The devs did not specify sort of the reset timer for this vendor, but did state that regardless of where you are in the world, there will be an opportunity for everyone during peak hours to take a look at this vendor. And a good way to know when the vendor will be available is to go to their location, where you will find a timer stating when they will arrive. Aside from the sort of nuances here, this really reminded me of Xur from Destiny, or the vendor from Warframe. I forgot to add that the vendor loot will scale with the world tier you're in when you visit. It will not scale if you pick up a piece of gear and move up the tiers or gear score. For example, if you're World Tier 1, you go to the vendor, you pick up a World Tier 1 piece of gear, something that's gear score 265. If you then go up to World Tier 2 and 3 and 4, that will still stay at World Tier 1. What you obviously do is when you get to World Tier 5, then it will scale to World Tier 5 when you pick that loot up. It won't scale once you already have it. I hope that makes sense. I'm pretty sure that makes sense. Another addition that becomes available at World Tier 1 is the deck of 52 cards. Now this was a little bit of a surprise to me and really cool actually. This is like a task to collect all 52 cards of a deck of cards. Now these 52 cards represent all 52 named bosses in the open world. 52 named bosses. That's crazy. Now I think the devs said there are only 15 in the division, but now we've got more than triple that. It's just crazy. Now each faction represents a different suit of cards, like hyenas for diamonds or true sons for spades, for example. The dev said that each time you take down one of these named bosses, they will drop a card, and the same enemy will not respawn until you take down all 52 or you collect all 52 cards. They confirm that the royal cards, i.e. Jack, King and Queen, will be significantly harder to defeat. if you say defeat and take all the cards for one suit, for example, diamonds, you will be rewarded with loot and other things. Commendations will be tied to the completion of this activity, so go out there and get those cards. Okay, so we've got all of this new stuff after you reach level 30 and the main campaign is finished. Now, in order to progress through the world tiers, as I said before, you will need to defeat 3 strongholds. Once you've completed these strongholds, you'll reach World Tier 4, where your final mission is to defeat the Tidal Basin Stronghold, which will take you to World Tier 5. Now, it's worth noting that World Tier 5 will not be available at launch, and I believe the devs wanted everyone to be kind of at the same level before they introduced World Tier 5, so I think it's going to be coming about a week or so after launch. So you hit World Tier 4, and more stuff happens, on top of everything already going on. A new activity called Priority Target Network becomes available, and these are interconnected set of 7 bounties inside of different named zones. They start on hard difficulty for the first 2 bounties, then the difficulty increases to challenging for the 3rd and heroic for the 4th bounty. There are 4 bounties per named zone. Just like all the other activities, the rewards will become much more lucrative the harder the bounty is. There are going to be weekly and daily bounties as well, and you'll get 2 normal difficulty bounties a day, and they will cost target intel. Now, target intel becomes available at World Tier 4, and this will drop from doing activities in the world like defeating enemies or defeating hard missions, just generally playing the game. There is a perk that you can unlock, which will give you an extra hard and challenging bounty per day, meaning you could have, or probably will have, 2 normal, 1 hard, and 1 challenging bounty per day. The devs also confirmed that the challenging difficulty will become available for all missions at World Tier 4 as well, and as I said before, control points can now become reinforced, with the difficulty scaling on basically your impact in the world and what you're doing around these control points. Now, the devs did go on and talk about how they've made all the bounties kind of unique and varied. There is a system in place. It's not random, but it kind of is, and it's really, really cool. I can't really explain it that well. I think it's probably best I run the clip from the stream, and that way you guys can see exactly what it is. But it sounds very, very cool. It just means that, from what I can tell, you know, we're going to be getting all of these bounties, and they're going to be so varied. There's almost an impossible amount of variations here. Take a look.
Infinitely varied, and we didn't touch on that before because you've built a system where they can be generated.
Yes. So, like, what's funny is the Scalpel and Butcher, who you met inside of the beta, who are the leaders of their squads. Those guys are statically made, and so we've got some authored bounties. Right? Yeah, those are the name zone guys, name zone bosses. And then there are also, during the end game campaign, after the invasion has started, there are also some authored like special bounties to introduce you to certain Black Tusk capabilities.
Cool.
But then on top of that, the dailies, the priority target network, all of those are generated using a set of rules. Mm-hmm. And so you get, here is the
North Lawn Bitches.
The North Lawn Bitches, led by Sharky, who I think was an engineer, who's an engineer who could have like EMP grenades in addition to other stuff, mm-hmm. or he may have killed another division agent and he might have a drone. Mm-hmm. Like their capabilities, based on their difficulty, they get essentially more of a budget to buy more and more skills to use against you. Mm-hmm. And so they get they become more varied the more difficult they are, but also they become more dangerous. There can be additional bosses rolling inside of their posses with them, and they are bringing more enemies with them. And all of that stuff, just like is generated using rules. Like, I don't like to say that they're randomized because mm-hmm. they're not. They have a logic to them, and there's a way to predict what they're going to have. But, like, I think the Outcast Assault has like 75,000 configurations that they can end up having if they're at heroic difficulties, something like that. Yeah, it's just a few.
I would love to come back to this I think a podcast would be a really good format to come back, because you explained to me the other day that a lot of the end game things, there's like a behind the scenes like manager who has a budget to spend on basically spawning whatever madness they want to create.
Yeah, like there's so much. Like, anybody who played mission replays during the beta noticed, like, if they played a replay more than once, they started to notice, hey, I didn't fight the same enemies every time, and sometimes they didn't come out of the same doors every time. And like, the bigger, more wild an arena is, the more varied the stuff that can happen inside of it is. And that applies to bounties, that applies to a lot of the open world content. We've built a bunch of managers to keep managers in Logic. Some of them aren't managed in that way. To keep things fresh, but also to be like, oh, here is a balanced piece of content that we know about.
Yeah.
Like true randomness sucks because it does nasty things to you. And so we try to build it to say like, oh, here's a good thing. Let's use that and make certain that that is one of the tools that the enemies are able to employ. And we just keep that logic going and built this whole system, or systems and systems of being able to say like, oh, this is a mutable, changeable place, but we try to stop it from being unfair because we've tested the individual parts well.
So guys, that was a digestible version of today's State of the Game, which was around 40 minutes long. I will leave a link to the full stream below. What do you think? I'm a bit shocked, to be honest. In a world where AAA developers appear to be providing the minimal viable product and then selling them as a games as a service, this amount of content at launch really breaks the mold. I've said it before, but BioWare, you need to be looking at this because you're having problems and this is how you fix it. The amount of content here for Endgame is truly staggering. And what's funny is, that's not all of it. The devs didn't discuss World Tier 5 and what's coming with that. Now, we know raids are coming, but it's likely there will be other extra stuff coming with World Tier 5, and that's just insane. I really have to take my hat off to the devs here. Credit where credit is due. There is more content in just World Tier 1 than there is in the whole of Anthem, and that apparently took 6 years to make, and Division 2 only took 3 years. As I've mentioned before, I've never been much of a PvE player, but I am so excited to get stuck in here, and I can see myself actually spending a lot more time in PvE than PvP this time around, and that says a lot about what the devs are doing here to turn me from a PvP player to what possibly could be a PvE player here is crazy. I never thought I'd say that. What's most impressive here is that the campaign is reported to be about 40 hours long. For an average player, I think probably most people, certainly myself, running through this will probably be 25, 30 hours maybe. And once you do all that, that will only be the beginning. All of the stuff I've just talked about comes after the campaign. That's just crazy. Anyway, I'm just going to end it here because there's only so many ways I can say that is crazy, that is amazing, I'm so happy. You get what I'm trying to say. I think the devs have done a really, really good job here. Without putting a downer on it, I just hope they fix the audio issues, and I'll talk about it in a separate video. But really what we're seeing here is brilliant. It does break the mold, and it's what I expected, to be honest. The devs have taken almost everything on board, and they've put it in this game. There is something for everyone here. Anyway, I'm rambling. I hope you enjoyed today's video, as I said at the start. If you did, a like would be truly, truly appreciated. Subscribe for constant, dedicated Division content. I will be streaming this game as of the 12th, which is only in 6 days. Next Tuesday, I will be streaming the full campaign. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You've got notifications on. That way you won't miss the stream or any of my videos as well following that or leading up to that. With that said, thanks for all your time. Epic out.